introduce Jeffu Warmouth. Jeffu Warmouth is a Massachusetts-based conceptual artist whose work asks the viewer to unravel their relationships to language, identity, and culture. His artwork over the past 3 decades has spanned a wide range of media: photography, video, sculpture, and interactive installations, guided by surrealist and conceptual art practices and a love for paradox, humor, and play. Most recently, he's been incorporating analog video synthesis into performance-based video sculptures. Jeffu will show his work from the past 3 decades, and that's the talk he's about to give. We've known each other for about 25 years, so most of that 3 decades. So it's going to be fun to see some of the oldies but goodies and some of the new stuff. And with that, welcome, Jeff.
Would you be okay if I swap my chair with the comfier one?
Sure, yeah, everybody get a comfy chair for sure.
I'm just, my bum hurts.
Let Chris get settled.
All right.
All right. So hi everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Michael, for inviting me to give a talk, and thanks for Artisan's Asylum for hosting. And thanks all for coming out on a Tuesday. I know, like, most of you out here, so this is great. And many of you have been around for all this. Should we want to keep the lights on? Or?
Please.
Yeah, I can't even see my own presentation. Yeah, exactly. Ooh, Sure. Oh, wow, yeah. Good enough. So I'm Jeffu Warmouth. I didn't always want to be an artist, though throughout my childhood in Michigan, I entertained ambitions to become a science fiction writer, an oil painter, a game designer, an actor, a computer programmer, a punk guitarist, and a brain surgeon. And I think, as you'll see, I've incorporated most of those into my artistic career, with the notable exception of brain surgeon, at least in the literal sense. I enrolled in the university, this is really like my superhero origin story, I guess. I enrolled at the University of Michigan thinking I would study pre-med, but...
Wait, is that you?
Yeah, that's a little
You didn't always have a mustache?
No. I got some hecklers, I see. But my pre-med ambitions unraveled pretty quickly as I became drawn into classes in literature and poetry, art history, philosophy, film, photography. Yes, that's also me. 19, I think. I was fascinated by Dada, surrealism, theater of the absurd, and other...
Nice jacket, by the way.
Thank you, sir. Other avant-garde art movements. I wrote and read at poetry slams. I played in experimental bands and developed an art practice in photography that I tried to align with some of those ideas. And my first serious art breakthrough came when my color photography professor, Ken Baird, told me, you need to push yourself, you need to use projection. So I did, and this is not me. I printed my friend Jason's poem, Dust Clouds, on transparent film, fed it into a slide projector, and aimed it at a window screen that I had him hold, and eureka, it worked. And so I continued this series as an experiment to try to achieve a sense of compressed space and layered information while remaining faithful to the photograph as an unmanipulated document. So I was projecting transparencies with text and slides onto window screens that I arranged in the studio. And really, I was creating layered compositions in the camera with multiple slide projectors about 3 years before you could do this with Photoshop. My friend Heather saying, I'm a tree. So I changed my major to arts and ideas and humanities, a sort of choose your own adventure program where I concentrated in comparative literature and fine arts photography. My thesis project, crossover image text. Hello. My thesis project, crossover image text, was an exploration of literature and photography that merged text and image. I was really interested in the semiotic play of immersing the linear and two-dimensional text within the illusionistic three-dimensional fabric of photographic space, or at least that's what my artist statement at the time kind of said. In my visual treatment of the 1914 poem Still Lifes by Blaise Cendrars, I continued to use this slide and transparency projection to emulate the workings of the poet's own ambiguous layering and montage, which he achieved through poetic experimentation. At graduation, my French literature professor, that is me on the right, but not that's my brother on the left, not my French literature professor. I don't have a picture of him. Asked what I was going to do next at graduation from college, and I said I wanted to live in either Paris or Tokyo, assuming that he would say, well, you need to go to France. And he said, go to the farthest place first. You could always go to France.
What year is this?
Oh, that's a great question. 1992. Yeah. So I moved to Japan in 1993, where I taught English, immersed myself in Japanese language and culture, made a couple records with Japanese noise musicians, you know, usual stuff that people do in Japan. Before I went, a friend said, you know, man, in Japan, they're going to call you Jeffu. Yeah. I stayed for 6 months. Back in Michigan, I worked a couple low responsibility jobs, played in a bunch of experimental bands, and continued doing photographic work using slide projectors to layer and distort. This is head surrounded by slides of beef after Francis Bacon. It's just always nice to see. It's always nice to see slides of beef after bacon. So, but I knew I really wanted to develop my work and to teach at the college level. So I moved to Boston to enroll in the MFA program at the SMFA at Tufts in 1994, which is when I went, which is where our story really begins. And for the first year, I did what you should do in art school. I took classes in everything: film, artist books, video art, welding, interactive and digital art, visual anthropology, Asian art. I experimented in a lot of different media, but my creative focus was still kind of on these photographs created through slide projections. In this series, Cardboard Dualities, I projected slides onto pieces of cardboard suspended from string and rephotographed the resulting tableau. The pairs included both sides of a single piece of cardboard, subverting the illusion of continuity. So like that. I was interested in photomontage and poetics and the Russian formalists' emphasis on the metaphorical, associative aspects of language, you know, making the familiar strange to invoke a sense of wonder. My first year ended with a particularly harsh review board, and I basically ended up feeling like I had photographed myself into a corner. I wanted to do work that was avant-garde and subversive, that was about language and culture, and that was funny. But the work I was doing seemed to reference classical beauty and structuralism, but the ideals felt really dry, and in a lot of ways they just didn't connect. And they probably don't feel like the Jeffu work that you have seen. So I went back to lick my wounds, really, for a summer. All activities seemed meaningless, well, except for cooking. I mean, I had to eat, and kung fu movies, and absurdist comedy, because belly laughs, you know, made me feel better. Okay, maybe there was a lot to love. So the Marx Brothers, Mad Magazine, and the Firesign Theater would need to supplement my more highbrow artistic influences. So my next big breakthrough was kind of a happy accident in the kitchen. And my eureka moment, I had found this low-budget hair growth advertisement in a newspaper. What's a newspaper? The youngins say, but we know. And I decided to stage a parody using an orange, so the kind of before, after of like the hair growth serum. And this, but the real eureka was I had a few frames left on the roll of film, so I transplanted the orange peel onto a carrot. And this is the one that, like, the image that sparked an absurd resurgence in my work that fueled me probably for the next decade of art making. I started playing with my food, developing projects that were about humor, language, visualized wordplay. This is Extraction. Had I had my wisdom teeth taken out recently? Oh yeah, actually. I started to develop a visual language that was a lot more direct than I had been working using mundane, everyday objects to craft ridiculous situations or visual jokes. This is milk kebabs. Demoiselle d'Oignon, after Picasso. Corn dog, which is in the collection of the Fitchburg Art Museum in the name of our former president of the university, 2 presidents ago, Antonucci, the good one. Potato optics, right? If potatoes had eyes, could they see? Reconstruction. I took a course on Jewish humor with scholar Lewis Kaplan, and in a critique, he noticed that a lot of these could be read as self-portraits. This one in particular, because my name's in it. Ashes to dust. Well, this is to dust on the negative. Bunny tautology. Q-tip bunny, so these kind of weird visual. Yes, we did have pet rabbits. My undergraduate poetry professor, Ken Michalowski, insisted that we write in a journal every day. And so that's really how I generated my ideas. I developed concepts in bits and pieces, a little sketch here that makes me laugh, a good pun that I could turn into something, a half-baked concept to rewrite later, and so on. I was in a 2-person show in Peekskill, New York. I'd started to pull this kind of anarchic punk rock energy into the exhibitions, not just the photos themselves, but the exhibitions. Oh yeah, this is shaving exercise, checkerboard. So pre-mustache, but still like doing comical things with the facial hair. Like I hung brand X, brand Y, X, brand Y with Band-Aids, electrical tape. And I wanted something to change in the gallery every day. So every day I would create these little typewritten and crudely sketched index cards that I would put a stamp on and mail to the gallery every day, and had them, have a growing wall of these little sketches that I called recipes, experiments. And they became a process for generating artwork. So they let me focus on raw comic ideas rather than refined pieces. So I could just set a tiny little period of time to just create these ridiculous little, drawing a blank, writing in invisible ink. For a while I forced myself to do at least one a day. The limitation of the format let me play 3 failed attempts at free association. It offered great creative possibilities that often developed into other projects, and I became really interested in the nature of humor. My MFA thesis show, Kitchen Craze, was this absurd amalgam of photos, videos, and kinetic and interactive sculptures. Everything was designed to directly address the viewer, put them in a transformed space filled with ludicrous jokes, visual experiments, and so on. The Jeffu here was juggling, like with motors, so the hands are moving, and the motor was trying and failing to lift a cabbage. Fred, you remember this? It made a noise because the cabbage would go boom, boom, boom. I'm glad I wasn't one of the gallery attendants working that show. Sorry everyone. You've done your service. From my artist statement at the time, humor is my primary vehicle for communication. I foreground language and jokes over the purely visual, emphasizing the relationship between visual content and title, and often using puns and other wordplay as a site for the creation of meaning. Yes, this is TV dinner. Humor may be created in the gap between understanding and incoherence, between the sign and what it represents. Using the strategies of the comic twist or turn, comic deflation, and self-subverting logical structures. As Bertolt Brecht suggested, spasms of the belly are often more profound than those of the soul. So this is, yes, infinite lemon battery, which is a lemon battery that powers a light behind the transparency of a lemon battery, which powers a light behind the transparency of a lemon battery, and so on. Infinite regression that I constructed. I construct infinity. I guess that's it. When this was egg with mirror yolk. The yolk's on you. Right. Art should be funny, and that was, I think, a guiding philosophy for a long time. This playful investigation of the construction of identity, buoyed by ideas from post-structuralism and semiotics, shaped by comedic approach and observed worldview, fueled my artistic career for decades. So after graduation, so after my MFA, so this would have been 1990, 2007, Lewis Kaplan curated me into a show about Jewish identity. I had taken his history of photography course, his media culture course, and a Jewish humor course in grad school. I was the token goy, as I don't have a Jewish background, but I was seriously interested in Jewish humor, and I really identified with it with Jewish humor and the strategies in my work. So the resulting project strictly, yes, chopped chicken livers in the form of a lobster. So it's strictly kosher style recipes spiced with Jewish humor is a series of absurdist recipes that address the kosher laws through Jewish humor, honoring the long-standing Jewish comedic tradition, which takes its own dietary laws as a point of departure. I sought to investigate, appreciate, and make light of the physical and mental boundaries between kosher and its other, the treif. The cookbook contains 25 absurdist recipes that take the kosher laws through the loops of Talmud Dadaistic logic.
Talmud Dadaistic logic.
So I entered another dimension in my work, which is doing projects with kind of extensive research into some subject. I wound up learning and actually, frankly, caring more about the kosher laws than most of my friends with Jewish backgrounds. I'm seeing some nods in the room. It was also an excellent way to really get into the mind of the Jewish comedian, to work with the material that fueled centuries of jokes dealing with transgression, illogic, and absurdity. Around this time, I also started to develop some parody products, in good fun, but more seriously thinking about how our personal identities are somehow intertwined with corporate identity. How our lives are influenced by branding and marketing, and of course how wonderful those Mad Magazine and Wacky Packs parodies were. Art Spiegelman, Harvey Kurtzman, Ernie Kovacs are all essential influences. And so my next grand gesture on the subject was my 2001 installation, Super Jeffu Market. A fragmented self-portrait as a grocery store stocked with consumer goods that dissect my body, culture, and psyche. The market's products also reflect our own self-images as media consumers.
That's when I first met
That's when you first, right?
Because you showed that at AIB.
Yeah. Did
That's
I show some of this stuff at AIB?
Oh yeah, Dunkin' Market, the grocery market.
Yeah. I definitely had this at the De Cordova.
Oh, at the Decorah.
Yeah. So here I'm deconstructed into pure grained self-esteem, shelled whole bruised ego, and Jeffu Shevet's bagel belly. And as much as the contents seem about food, obviously, but it was also an investigation into media and meaning, about how mass media breaks down and rebuilds our identity through advertising, but presented through absurd comedy and social critique. In Ways of Seeing, John Berger describes how publicity creates glamour, showing a vision of the viewer's future in a position of envy. And the viewer desires their own future, they loathe their present self, the manufacturer sells back the viewer's self-love for the price of the product. Like, you need this perfume to be a complete person, so you must not be complete. And we see this still all the time. So I began thinking about the cans as pure media rather than food. People could comparison shop, pick and choose to the products that are all little jokes, but the complete installation adds up to more than the sum of its parts. If we are what we eat and we constantly consume media, then we become constructions of that media. And what happens if I reverse the process to deconstruct myself into a fragmented set of commodities?
Great graphic art, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, and these were silk screen. These guys were silk screen.
Did you use like full cans or?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the supermarket, the installation, they're actually empty cans, but these are available on my website, and you'll get full cans because you should really have that experience of having full cans. But it's pretty heavy to carry and store for like an installation, so it's nicer to have some boxes full of empty cans just for the practicality of it. But it does feel weird to pick up an empty can. It doesn't like feel, it should feel real, right? It should feel squishy, right? It's not like Raisin Brain if it's not squishy, exactly. So it must have been a good idea because 20 years later, innovative art collective Meow Wolf created Omega Mart, which uses a similar entry point of humor, absurdism, and consumer culture to construct an immersive narrative about identity, loss, collectivism, culture, and parallel dimensions. Anybody been to a Meow Wolf? Yeah, it's good stuff. If you have a chance, I definitely urge you to visit Omega Mart in Las Vegas. It's quite a spectacle. As the tagline says, "You have no idea what's in store for you." So I'm going to shift gears from the main thread of installation stuff to show you some parallel threads throughout my career. One of these is the many collaborative projects I've worked on over the years, kind of proof that I'm not a hermit hiding in my own root cellar, which it could seem like from. So in grad school, I co-founded Kaiju Big Battle, an intentionally misspelled performance and media collective who staged live monster wrestling events featuring performers dressed in foam and latex suits, inspired by Japanese tokusatsu films and TV shows, the live action, Godzilla, Ultraman, Masked Rider, these kinds of shows. We enacted epic narratives in a wrestling ring cityscape populated with miniature buildings and vehicles. Kaiju was a pretty interesting hybrid practice. It was a montage of disparate popular culture elements glued together by a healthy sense of the absurd, culture shock, language play, and good, clean fun. Right? We drew from and also made an impact on pop culture. Kaiju was the inspiration for the character of Fred in the 2014 Disney movie Big Hero 6, which is kind of cool. In the early 2000s, the group relocated to New York, and they're still active. So I helped found them. I was involved with it for a few years, but they've now been going for another.
Amazing.
How many? What year is it? Another 25 years. They've been going strong without me. So obviously they're more powerful than I am. In 2004, George Fifield, curator and director later of Boston Cyber Arts, brought together 5 artists, myself included, to create a collaborative exhibition at Art Interactive in Cambridge. Anybody remember that place? You showed there. That would be up during the Democratic National Convention in Boston in 2004. The resulting exhibition, Participatory Democracy, was a carnivalesque satire of the voting process from registration to exit polling. So we had things like Democracy, Vote Alley, and Futuro Vote that skewered the electronic voting processes at the time. These were my big contribution. Yeah, Diebold, and I think these were targets from Vote Toss, which was voting by darts. Art Showdown was a frontier-themed art game show that I co-produced and developed collaboratively with a huge team of artists. So co-produced. Roland Smart was the other. Some of you know Roland was the other producer. But we had a big team of artists that we collaboratively created the show with. It was shot in front of a live studio audience, again at Art Interactive. Art Showdown pitted artists against one another in 7 30-minute episodes, culminating in the Ultimate Artist Challenge, in which one contestant remains standing after defeating a herd of talented challengers. We explored highbrow versus lowbrow interpretations of contemporary culture and exploited the best and the worst of the game show genre through the lens of the arts. Contests included Schmooze and Booze, in which contestants have to eat, drink, and schmooze to curry the favor of a guest curator. This is artist Andrew Mowbray telling curator Nick Capasso that my work is awesome, it's just awesome, before stuffing his mouth full of jalapeno cheese cubes, so before he could be refuted. And then another parallel thread, kind of, because I was doing these alongside of these other installations and the bigger collaborative pieces, were these epic narrative films with all vegetable casts. And it started with Kung Fu Kitchen, a martial arts movie. I wanted to see if I could anthropomorphize food and inanimate objects using camera and editing tricks. So, and it started in grad school with one of these recipes experiments, but I finished it a couple years later and screened it in the film festival circuit. Il Spaghetti Occidentali was an Italian-style Western, again with an all-vegetable cast. Clive Earwest plays the vegetable with no name, right? The anti-hero who blasts his way through the Western kitchen for what? Some unspoken treasure, a nameless glory, the chance to shoot a dozen other vegetables in a showdown. Day of the Cabbage was a monster movie, full of wordplay and tropes from 50s atomic scare films. The big difference here is now I had my hands on HD cameras, so it's higher production values. I worked with the team to design elaborate sets and lighting and visual effects and sound.
Did you animate any of this?
Yeah. But most of it was live action, puppetry. We'll say puppetry more than animation. I took this on the festival circuit, but also designed like diorama themed installations to show the work in galleries. And then kind of an evolution of this, that then back into the world of photo installation art, was Spudnik, which started with a sketch of the original sketch of this, just this kind of potato floating in space, thinking about sci-fi movie posters. And I was invited to exhibit at the Córdoba Museum. The project grew into an installation with photographs, didactic wall text, models, and a mockumentary video about potatopian spice exploration and the cold storage war. Of course, the Spudnik project was full of wordplay humor, from the name to the spice backgrounds, salt, oregano, and paprika, to the names of scientists, planets, and equipment. This is the X-27 syrup lander explores pancake. Being actively comedic was important to me as a form of accessibility to keep myself and my audience laughing. I exhibited and screened the film in the Kaunas Photo Festival in Lithuania, where the director told me I had no idea how important potatoes were to Lithuanian culture.
They are now.
Yeah, and back in the day, Fred helped me make prints of these. I continued with some other photos referencing museums and dioramas. Breakfast on the Cereal Reef is really, in retrospect, where the anthropomorphized food really kind of jumped the shark. And I don't always figure out that I hit a dead end until it's too late. I really could have made this entire talk about dead ends, but I think, you know, a thread that goes and then finds a new connection and jumps is about what it, but this is the point where it really just started to feel too kitsch, and I needed to make work that was relevant. And I don't know. So in 2008, I returned to my work on that was really more about consumer culture, and with the camera focused on me. With JFC, which is this absurd little interactive video sculpture. Started out as this small version set in a plastic bucket. Pressing a button played a video of me interacting with a random deep fried object. JFC, I was nice to keep JFC as an acronym because it could stand for anything. Jeffu's foolish comedy, Jeffu's frenzied consumerism, and so on. And for the 2009 Boston Cyber Arts Festival, this was at Art Institute of Boston, and Fred was involved in this show as well as a curator or and impresario of technical awesomeness. I pitted two competing fast food franchises against one another. JFC, in Big End over here, and Jeffu Burger are interactive fast food stands where viewers order via touchscreen, triggering a life-sized video Jeffu to prepare conceptual recipes, endure absurd situations, or overturn logic. I used humor to reflect on the cybernetic and cultural experience of fast food. in which both workers and customers perform pre-programmed scripts to order products that can only be made using industrialized technology, including factory farming and industrial transport, refrigeration, and storage. Would you like to supersize that? Would you like fries with that? Right? Everybody's kind of a computer program in the process. In these short comic video performances, is inspired as much by Sid Caesar's axiom, funny first, philosophical second, I used semiotics and deep fryer fat to investigate the viewer's relationship to language, advertising, and culture.
Is our most exciting combo meal ever. Insert coin, and you become player one. Grab a ketchup bottle to repel the invaders from planet Burgopia. It takes a steady hand and a good sense of taste, or else it's game over.
Who did the narration? It's so good.
That is, I'll have to look up his name,
Okay.
but I actually, I outsourced the name. It was like Smilin' Jack Andrews or something. Like he had this amazing like name and voice for radio. When I presented Jeffu Burger at the 404,
Hamburguesa infinitamente alta. A veces una hamburguesa simplemente no es suficiente.
so I presented this at the 404 Festival of Art and Technology in Argentina and worked with Gina Valenti, the festival's creative director, to make the work accessible to a Spanish-speaking audience. So we translated everything, the menus, the voiceover, then the response and the experience were incredible. One student volunteer told me he thought it was incredibly important to see an American artist present work that was critical of American culture and policy, and to do it through the accessible mode of humor. Yeah, and what I hadn't even connected until I got to talking with him is that, you know, Argentina is Monsanto country, as in like American, like that is like the depth of American industrial farming in Argentina. So like to hear an American say, actually, maybe we shouldn't be doing that, I was like, oh.
Don't eat chicken. Come over to JFC and place an order.
So when I pair multiple installations in the same exhibition space, the other franchise hurls abuse at its competitor and attempts to lure the hapless viewer to the other side. It's a playful, chaotic, noisy exploration of the fragmentation of identity in the consumer age. Randomly deep-fried object. Except when it's quiet. So when visitors aren't actively making choices, the food stands go into an idle mode, engaged in activities they might perform when they think no one's looking, not unlike non-player characters in video games when they're not engaged by a player.
iSlice. The great thing about the iSlice is that there's a topping for everything. Trapped in an existential crisis, wondering if the universe has any meaning, and if not, should you still pick up the dry cleaning? There's a topping for that. Only on the iSlice.
I just started reading Cory Doctorow's Shitification, which just came out, and they actually he uses Apple and the iPhone as a case study of technological platform rot is maybe the more academic term, but shitification has such a nice ring to it. Oh yeah, but this is a great touch point to talk about the relationship with art and technology over the years. When Nick Capasso, director of the Fitchburg Art Museum, asked, "So how long do you plan to be the funny food guy?" I kind of realized I might have been stuck in a rut. Though some people are cut out for the fast-paced restaurant world, I had to find an exit from art food service. So I started looking more closely at those idling modes as fuel for absurdity, fragmentation, and performance. When I initially created the food court installations, I was interested in more active performance within the works, but I started to find the more passive and naturalistic actions to be potentially interesting to dig into a bit more deeply. My next significant body of work was a series of these performance-based video compositions projected onto walls that explore the body's relationship to marginal aspects of our environments. And this one's actually never been exhibited because it was just sort of a test piece, but just like a little piece of wall trim and playing around with that. So I called the series Marginalia, referencing note-taking and sketching, stop-motion animations in the margins of books, Talmudic commentary, and Sergio Aragonés' classic marginal cartoons in Mad Magazine. So in Marginalia, crawl, multiple iterations of the artist, me, crawl along a jumbled vinyl window blinds attached to the wall. The vinyl strips are real, and the videos running on a projector mapped to the wall-mounted objects. When I showed this at Boston Cyber Arts, another artist said, I love your work, it's always so hilarious. And ironically, this was the first work in over a decade in which I was not trying to do comedy. So maybe I failed at being serious. In Marginalia, drop, multiple iterations, multiple Jeffus carry boxes and drop them into a growing stack, projected onto this little wall construction made out of pizza boxes. When I showed this at the University Film and Video Association conference in Chicago, one of the student installation assistants told me that he really responded to the work because it reminded him of a recent warehouse job that was really soul-crushing. So, like, is the work whimsical and fun, or repetitive and horrible? Depends on your perspective. That's the human condition. These began to take the form of video sculptures, too, at times. So discrete objects that contained video as part of their logic and structure, like Up, mounted in a cardboard shipping box. Their performances played out in loops, like Sisyphus rolling a boulder uphill, indefinitely as punishment for angering the gods. This one's no more funny stuff. Under constant bombardment by media messages, images, waves, radiation, it is, says my artist statement at the time, it is increasingly difficult to focus one's attention inward. My brain can't hear itself meditate. Pointless, repetitive action may be the only way to get in there, or even to assert that there is an in there. To achieve the serenity of a battery-powered toy. Some of these video sculptures reference the size and shape of CRT monitors, imagining that they might contain full-sized talking heads. Four Horsemen is inspired by a group of performance poets from the 1970s. Look them up, they're great. In the spirit of minimalism, surprise, repetition, timing, tension, and release, I dedicated this to avant-garde performers across the ages. It's a little larger than life, but really these were CRT monitors about big. The ultimate expression of this was probably Three Heads Are Better Than One, a video installation and live performance. A long shelf holds two TV monitors with life-size video heads of me on either end. As a sculpture, the TV heads have an idle mode. When performing, though, I stand in the middle of the sculpture with my head poking through a hole in the shelf, engaging in a scripted trialogue with the other two Jeffus. The trio of talking heads slowly evolve their speech patterns from random guttural grunts to sing-song sounds, and then finally to hilarious. I like yelling, apparently. It's the punk rock background. But finally to hilarious and aggressive banter that reflects the harmony and dissonance in our everyday discourse.
A, absurdist, autocratic. B, curly-headed. C, crusty. D,
I continued to explore these gestural performances at a much larger scale through Art on the Marquee. This was a 10-year collaboration between the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center and Boston Cyber Arts that gave artists the opportunity to develop works for the 80-foot-high, 7-screen outdoor public LED marquee. George Fifield proudly called it the largest video screen in New England. So I began creating a series of works featuring life-sized multiples of myself, or larger than life, engaged in activities, absurd, ludicrous, or tragic comics, which is a nice term used by Samuel Beckett to describe Waiting for Godot, but originally coined by Roman dramatist Plautus in the 2nd century. And so in fall, multiple Jeffus fall through the sky, land in water, and then swim around. In One Up, I inhabit classic arcade game environments of Donkey Kong, Joust, and Dig Dug, modified to become pixel art analogs of the real architecture surrounding the marquee. This is around the time that I co-created the game design major at Fitchburg State, but I'm sure that's just a coincidence and has nothing to do with the artistic narratives. Oh yeah, by the way, so this would have been, I want to say 2011, but I started teaching at Fitchburg State in 1997, so I've been there now for 29 years. Started teaching film and interactive media, film, video, interactive media, and then about 12 years ago, I co-created the game design program. So some of that stuff might factor into the work. I created 12 works for Art on the Marquee over the years, including collaborative works with Anne Lilly and with Ellen Wetmore, my wife. We kind of float away with all the figures of being adult humans. And then I also ran an annual student program for the of creating work for the Art on the Marquee. So something in that capacity.
Is that still going at all?
No, I mean I think the marquee itself is there, and the Boston Convention Center actually owns all the work that was created for it because they bought the works, they commissioned the works. I know Michael has some pieces for it. Did you ever do anything for the marquee, Andrew? I don't know. Maybe there are a couple of us in that room.
Someone told me it was upgraded, that they've upgraded the marquee.
I heard that they upgraded it. Yeah.
You did layout, you helped me do my layout.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Oh, that's right.
It was such a pain.
You did do it. Yeah.
That shape was so
Mhm,
weird.
mhm. 7 screens and a weird After Effects project. And, I created other public video works as well, including a piece called Merge for the Digital Arts and Entertainment Lab in Atlanta, and then this piece, 9 Gestures, for the public media wall at Fitchburg State, in which I incorporated modified versions of some of my previous works as well as some new pieces. And this was, 2012 or so? 2014? I don't remember exactly, but a while ago. For the next few years, I explored other art pathways as well, including inflatable sculpture, 3D animation, works on paper. My 2019 installation, Urgent Blowout, at Boston Sculptures Gallery features a 10-foot wide inflatable fabric head, hollowed out and filled with dozens of smaller fabric heads, sewn from self-portrait photos and 3D scans. It also included a 3D rendered animation. From my artist statement, Urgent Blowout amplifies our desire to fill, inflate, and replicate ourselves. We float around aimlessly, bumping into one another, changing course based on wind currents, Black Friday sales, foreign influence, and cat gifts. We may not know where we're going, but we remain desperate to get there quickly. This all looks so much more terrifying on this projector. The title was inspired, believe it or not, by the headline. Urgent Blowout was inspired, believe it or not, by the headline from a Harbor Freight Tools direct mail advertising flyer. But I felt it had absurd resonance to be feeling pulled in different directions through consumer culture and social media. My 2022 exhibition, Stamped Sketches and Stomp Boxes, was at Boston Sculptures Gallery and featured sculpture, works on paper, and animated video. The centerpiece in the show is Jeffu Model Kit, a collaboration with the very talented sculptor Ellen Wetmore, who I'm married to, so some know Ellen, so I better say that. But she is. The title is pretty direct. It's a life-sized self-portrait as a plastic model kit to be separated from its plastic sprues and reassembled into a complete person in the mind of the viewer. The parts are plastic, some are life cast, some from mannequins, and the head is cast from a clay sculpture that Ellen made. Like Super Jeffu Market from 20 years earlier and much of the work in between, it's a playful exploration of the idea that humans are fragmented by the landscape of our consumer and media culture, literally pulled into multiple parts. In 1923, Picasso said, "Art is the lie that reveals truth." I've heard humor described this way as well, though we don't have an iconic humorist on record as making the claim. So these comical fictions made plastic, literally, problematize our media ecology, as I understand it. We're constantly taking ourselves apart, inflating and deflating ourselves. This is time to inflate. poking around at our own foundations. This is a good plan needs a solid foundation. Wandering or waving semiotic index fingers in all directions. And hopefully putting ourselves back together. But it's up to the artist, the humorist, the philosopher to highlight problems, but not necessarily to posit solutions, right? Luckily artists don't actually have to figure it out. We just have to figure out how crazy things are. As German artists, art critic Bazon Brock noted, it's the domain of artists to highlight failure because who else is going to do it? At one point I wanted to flip these idling performances around to turn the mirror back on the audience. So I created this interactive installation Lilliput, a sort of inversion of the marginalia performances. I was inspired by a lot of other interactive video work, including Sadao Fujioka's A Tale of Space-Time, but also just other works stretching back through video art history back to Dan Graham, who played with the audience interacting in real time with their past selves. So here's Lilliput installed at Fitchburg State. Viewers who stand in front of the screen find themselves engaged in catching these small falling human figures, but while they're playing with the work, it's actually recording them, and later they're added to the array of figures that fall for the next person to catch. It's both delightful and uncanny for the audience. And this showed at Boston Cyber Arts, and I think this showed at Emerson Media Arts as well. At one point. My gravity engine was terrible. I also spent time creating works on paper created by typewriter or stamping or woodblock printing. The Stamp Sketch series are works on paper created by stamping inked wooden blocks and rubber toys and other household objects, working primarily in black and red, yes that is red, ink. I like the edge grain of wood because it brings texture marks that are organic and unpredictable. The technology we use helps to shape the meaning, as Marshall McLuhan famously argued in The Medium is the Message. The print started to develop a language of their own through the spare, minimal set of marks, the dot, the line, the square, hand. And I've made a visual language of being, of stretching, pointing, reflection, surprise, maybe developing ideas that I couldn't necessarily formulate in language or through video. But these compositions really did demand movement. So I wrote a custom software tool to help me create digital animations from the scans of the stamped elements. They're intentionally flickering, reminiscent of stop motion or early hand-drawn indie animations as opposed to the smooth motion of modern Hollywood animated features. So it's like multiple printed, impressions of each of the blocks or hands or whatever, and then they're in a little looping cycle. From there, it made sense to open this up to other users. So I developed Stamp Sketch Interactive, a touch table that I showed at the 404 Festival of Art and Technology in Mexico City in 2022, in which visitors could create their own animated drawings from my stamps. In that move from the slow individual process of creating a physical drawing one stamp at a time to the collective activity of a group making an animation together interactively, what changed? And I'm still figuring that out, but there's something about the collective action of this that's, I think, amazing, and I'd like to return to it. Yeah, there's a bit of a lag. Not in this video, but just in the actual drawing part. So I went back to the slow process. I created a series of asemic drawings with no direct meaning in the marks. That worked intuitively and created a drawing a day for probably a year, referencing microscopy, surrealist automatic drawings, or abstract illuminated manuscripts. But really, eventually, I made it back to printing, working on what eventually became this series, Blockheads, series of woodblock prints that shifted from the hybrid monsters and fragmented body parts of the Stamp Sketch series into compositions that suggested the full body performances for the video camera, like we saw in Marginalia and the Art of the Marquee works. Although these figures are really just crudely chiseled out of bits of wood, bits of 2x4 and plywood, people started assuming that they were me. So I leaned into it and started carving wood blocks that I traced from my own silhouette, taken from photos or from video stills. These blockhead figures that had been splashing themselves all over the page for me now insisted on a similar video performance a la Jeffu. So we've gone from video to, as the outline, to woodblock prints, and then I staged a performance for the camera. The idea was that I was one of these blockhead figures, and I'd be pulling off my head to find another block, and so on, and eventually they'd pile up. So I replaced that cardboard box with an animated wood block, and the results were, I don't know, sort of blah. I thought it would work well but I needed something a little more dynamic and expressive. So I started thinking about video artists and technologists in the 70s like Namjoon Paik, Walter Wright, and Steiner, who developed systems for creating real-time cameraless visual imagery using analog electronic means. Their video synthesizers were individual and idiosyncratic and not available commercially, but I found some software to emulate the wild electronic noise and patterns of video synthesis. I liked it. It made sense in this context. I created the sound using an analog vintage sound synthesizer, the Octave Cat, but of course I was now hooked. Emulation was not good enough. So I started research and experimentation, first using digital tools, learned to use Touch Designer a little tiny bit, along with a MIDI input device to build oscillator-based sound and video. But the digital emulation just felt too clinical. Most of this is generated, for people that know like video synth stuff, digitally at least. This is done with Lumen and cathode dimmer. But the digital emulation really felt too clinical, so I read Handmade Electronic Music, The Art of Hardware Hacking, and connected with a community of technical video artists who were working with analog tools. And this is, of course, after I called Andrew, and I was like, man, how do I get into video synthesis? And so I began with some experimental approaches outlined by Jonas Bears and Lovid to hack into VGA video signal generators using handmade circuits to create noisy abstract patterns. I leveled up my soldering skills to prototype and create sine wave generators, oscillators that I ran into the red, green, and blue channels, and started playing to understand how it works. And the oscillators create lines in each color, but if you dial things in, it gets weird. The lines get diagonal and wiggly and interfere with each other. Through experimentation, I learned how to use them as playable instruments to create audio and video, and that was it. My leap from bread machine mix to wild yeast sourdough. I discovered wild fermentation in the form of hacked electronics. I built a more robust CHAV synth designed by Jonas Bears, a modular RGB video synthesizer, obtainable just as a kit, parts to be soldered. I combined the generated analog image and sound with video of myself performing actions or gestures, interacting or engaging with the wild nature of the electronic circuits. Huh? I do? Oh yeah, here we go. If I Could Lasso the Rising Sun is a video sculpture consisting of 2 CRT monitors with synchronized videos. It's a simple idea, but it's layered. The performer on the bottom is holding a line that connects to this oversized ball in the upper monitor, struggling to keep it under control. Both the video and the audio are generated by the analog synthesizers. I spent time on the aesthetics. The flicker, they're like a flip book of woodblock prints, or really like the same kind of motion that we saw in the stamp sketch stuff. The line connecting them is actually the audio waveform from the ball. The ball's technically a set of scanned block prints of the edge of a wooden dowel, but metaphorically it could be anything that humans are wrestling with. It's a poetic gesture, but I was thinking, what's that?
Well, it looks like moire patterns, but
Yeah.
is that what it is?
Oh yeah, there's more. Oh yeah, it's hard to see the detail. There is moire pattern just from the TV itself, but there's definitely some like strange little like oscillator, waves and movement. Yeah, I've lost my scroll for text, but that's okay. I think I was thinking about wrestling with with AI, or wrestling with whatever the big beast is right now, whatever the big technological beast is that we can't quite control. Harnessing the miasma is a similar structure and idea, but with 3 monitors. 2 humans struggle to control an ever-shifting mass. A friend noted that it was the perfect metaphor for the political situation in this country, but I'm not so sure we've seen this level of cooperation in decades. Right? I'm finding that voltage and circuit-driven video synthesis has this unpredictability that feels at times like trying to harness nature, like finding a patch of wild berries or flowers amidst the thorny weeds at the edge of civilization. And I don't know, maybe we can use wild art to fight fascism somehow. Hot Potatoes still in progress. It features 2 blockhead performers who need to share a single head. These, again, like the gestures and actions are simple, they're iconic, and I hope the technological element expands the expressive possibilities of the work and creates some new meaning. I'm ultimately, in these works, exploring what it means to be human and to be an artist, to struggle, to compromise, to maintain, to communicate, to think, to move, exist, to thrive and delight, think and react, embrace and reject. So I don't know. This is the new stuff, and we'll see we'll see how long it holds my interest before I follow another thread to a dead end. I will be showing several of these as sculptures at Masari Studios in a couple weeks, so stay tuned to Instagram and social media, and I'll make sure that I post when it's happening. There's a series called Art School Confidential. If you're not, it's at Masari in. It's in the Midway Studio, Midway building in Fort Point. So follow. If you're not following me, follow me. If you want to email me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook still, though that's been enshittified so much that I don't know how long I'll stay there. But
we're all trapped.
Again, I like platform rot as a concept, but Cory Doctorow's enshittification, check it out. It's so far I'm hooked. Except I only got the 30-page preview, and so now I have to buy it and I have to figure out what non-rotting platform to get from, and my local public library has not gotten its copy yet. But, all right. Well, thank you again all for coming out on a Tuesday, whatever that means. Is it Tuesday? It is Tuesday. All right. And thanks, Michael and Artisan. I'm always up for questions.